I've been sitting here for hours, staring at the same pile of letters. These goddamn letters. Some people might find them mundane, even dull. Not me, not anymore. They were the beginning of the end, after all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning, which is, for all intents and purposes, where everything started to go to hell. I'm not a fool. At least, I don't think I am. I've lived 65 years, seen plenty, survived a few things. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I found that day. My son, my eldest, Adam. He's always been the good one, the responsible one, the one I could count on. That's what they all said, right? He's such a good kid, such a reliable son, always helping out. He could charm the pants off anyone with that sweet smile of his. But behind that smile was a mind working overtime to make me a fool. I should have seen the signs. It's funny how life works, always so clear in hindsight. I was raised to trust people, especially family. Your blood, your own flesh and bone, they're supposed to have your back. That's what I thought, what I still wanted to believe. But the truth was a slow burn, a sickness that spread through my chest like cancer, a deep gnawing pain that I didn't recognize until it was too late. I never really checked the mail. It wasn't that I couldn't, it was just that I never had. The time, or the energy, to be honest. At my age, you learn to let some things slide, but this particular day I was tired. My arthritis had been giving me hell, and the weather outside was miserable, grey, cold, the kind of rain that makes everything feel heavier. So I was in a mood. One of those moods where nothing feels right, but you keep pretending. That's when I decided to go through the pile of letters. I was looking for a bill, I think. Or maybe it was something from the retirement agency. I've got a lot of those little things to manage, and I've learned that if I don't stay on top of them, they'll pile up and bite me in the ass. But instead of a bill, I found something much more interesting. The letter was from the bank, not just any bank, mind you, but the bank where I had my checking account, the place where I thought my savings were safe. I've had the same account for years, never thought twice about it. Hell, I barely ever thought about it at all, but there it was, bold and threatening in its simplicity. Important notice regarding your loan application. Now, I don't know much about loans. At least, I didn't think I did. But I sure as hell didn't apply for one. Not now. Not ever. I'd spent my whole life avoiding debt like the plague. I grew up poor, and I never wanted to go back to that. And place. I learned early that you live within your means, and you don't take out loans unless you absolutely have to. I didn't absolutely have to. So I threw the letter aside, assuming it was some sort of mistake, but then I noticed something. The letter wasn't just a generic notice. No, it was a confirmation of a loan that had already been approved. And if you ask me, there's nothing more dangerous than someone confirming a loan in your name without your knowledge. If you ask me, that's damn near criminal. I couldn't make sense of it. So I did what any self-respecting old man would do when confronted with something confusing. Grabbed my glasses and squinted at the small print. There it was, clear as day. My name, my social security number, the loan amount, a sum I couldn't even fathom, though it seemed small to some people, about $15,000. But to me, that was a goddamn fortune, a fortune that wasn't mine. It belonged to someone else, someone who took advantage of me. But the real kicker, the one that made my blood run cold, the date. The loan had been taken out 3 years ago. I could feel my heart hammering against my chest. My hands shook as I flipped through the pile, looking for the other letters, the other ones that would explain how I ended up in this mess. And sure enough, there they were. More letters from the bank, each one more infuriating than the last. They were all addressed to me, my name, my address, and every single one of them was about that damn loan. Payments, adjustments, terms. I didn't remember agreeing to any of it. Hell, I didn't even remember signing anything, and I sure as hell didn't remember taking out a loan. I can't say how long I sat there staring at those letters. An hour, maybe more. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. I wanted to yell, to scream, to pick up the phone and call someone, anyone. But I knew that wouldn't do any good. The truth was staring me right in the face, and it was damn ugly. Adam, my son, my own flesh and blood had done this. I didn't need to see his name on the papers to know who was behind it. He'd always been the one to help with my finances, always poking around in my business, asking questions, offering advice. You know, Dad, it's about time you start investing. I never should have let him in. I should have known better. I wish I could say I was shocked, that I was floored by the discovery, but I wasn't, not really. In a way, I had known something was off. He had always been a little too eager, a little too willing to help, always had an excuse for his behavior, always a reason why he needed money, always someone else who was to blame when things went wrong. I just didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe it. I'd never thought he'd go this far, never thought he'd rob me blind. But that's what he did. He took my money, my trust, and turned it into some game, some scheme I wasn't even aware of. I felt sick to my stomach. The anger was bubbling up inside me, but I didn't know what to do with it. What was the point in confronting him? He'd lie. He always did. And what was I supposed to do? Call the cops on my own son? Have him arrested for something he'd done to me? The idea seemed ridiculous. But I wasn't stupid. I knew I couldn't let this go. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down, but the truth was I wasn't calm. I was furious. And more than that, I was heartbroken. I thought I'd raised him better than this, but I guess I was wrong, and that's when the idea came to me. Maybe I wasn't going to call the cops. Maybe I wasn't going to get him arrested. Maybe I wasn't even going to confront him. But there were other ways to get even. The truth hit me harder than I ever could have expected. I had spent my whole life thinking I was a tough old bastard. I had weathered wars, heart attacks, the death of loved ones, and 1,000 other little indignities that come with being a man of my age. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for this betrayal. Adam, my firstborn, the one I'd spent years nurturing, guiding, loving, had turned me into a fool. He wasn't the man I thought he was. No, the man I thought he was, the one I had built in my mind, was just a mirage, an illusion I had stubbornly clung to. And now the truth was staring me in the face like a slap across my wrinkled cheek. I could feel the anger building again. It was a slow burn, creeping up from deep inside me, wrapping itself around my insides like an unrelenting fire. But this time I didn't want to explode. This time I wasn't going to shout or scream. I wasn't going to make a scene. No, I was going to play it cool. I was going to let him think he'd gotten away with it. I was going to let him live in his little bubble of lies for a while longer. And when the time was right, I'd strike. There's something sweet about revenge, you know. It doesn't matter how old you are. There's a certain satisfaction that comes with making someone feel the weight of their own actions. But it's not about rage. It's about patience. It's about letting time do its work. I knew that if I acted too quickly, I'd lose my edge. I had to be methodical. I had to let the plan unfold on its own. It wasn't hard to figure out where to start. Adam's always been an open book. He thought he was the smartest guy in the room, always bragging about his accomplishments, always talking about his plans, his future. But the thing about arrogant people is they're always too busy patting themselves on the back to notice when someone else is paying attention. And I had been paying attention, more than he ever realized. First, I needed to make sure I had every little detail about this loan. I needed to see exactly how deep his lies ran. The more I knew, the more leverage I would have when it came time to confront him. So I spent the next few days poring over the bank statements, the loan documents, and every other scrap of information I could find. It wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. Once I knew where to look, it all came tumbling out. Payments, adjustments, interest rates, and the entire mess of his deceit. I saw that the loan had been split into small payments, just enough to fly under the radar. A little here, a little there, just enough to avoid suspicion. But it was clear that Adam had been making the payments himself, slowly siphoning money from my account without me ever noticing. And why wouldn't he? I was an old man, set in my ways, barely paying attention to anything. I never checked the bank statements, and I rarely even went online. He knew that. I didn't know how long he'd been doing it, but I didn't need to. It was the principle of the thing that mattered. He had used my trust, my complacency, to line his pockets. And, what the worst part, I didn't even need to confront him about the loan yet. That was just the tip of the iceberg. Adam had been stealing from me for years. Little things at first, small withdrawals from my checking account that I didn't notice. He'd always been good at making it look like it was nothing, that it was just an accident, just a little mistake. And every time I'd forgive him. After all, it was my son. What was I supposed to do? But now I had the proof. I had everything I needed, and I wasn't about to let it go. Not this time. I spent the next few weeks keeping my distance from Adam, playing the part of the confused, frail old man. I didn't want him to know I was onto him. I didn't want him to see the gears turning in my head. I wanted him to think everything was normal, that I was still that bumbling old fool he could manipulate. I let him visit. I let him bring me lunch and talk about his life, his work, his big ideas. Every time I nodded along, pretending to care. I didn't want to raise any suspicion. I needed him to feel safe, to think he was still in control. And every time I watched him, studying his movements, listening to his words, trying to catch him in a lie. And then, one day, it happened. Adam came over to help me with some paperwork. Something about my health insurance, or so he said. He had this look in his eyes. The same one he always had when he thought he was doing me a favor. He was trying too hard, like he was making an effort to be the good son. He was trying to make up for something, though I didn't know what. I wasn't about to let him off the hook so easily. We sat down at the kitchen table, and he started sifting through papers. I was trying to be casual, acting like I didn't have a care in the world. But every time he glanced at me, I felt a twinge of satisfaction. He had no idea what was coming. I could tell he was nervous. He kept fidgeting with his shirt sleeve, a nervous tick I'd noticed 100 times before. That was when I knew it was time. Time to drop the bomb. "Adam," I said, my voice calm, too calm. "I've been looking at my bank statements." He froze, just for a second, but it was enough. He was trying to cover it, to keep his face neutral, but I could see the panic behind his eyes. "Oh?" he said, his voice too high-pitched. "Why would you be doing that?" "I'm just being careful," I replied. "I'm getting older, you know, and I noticed something strange, something about a loan. I watched him closely. He didn't blink. He didn't move. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the edges of the paper. "Loan," he said, frowning. "What loan?" "The one you and took out in my name," I said, leaning back in my chair. "The one you've been paying off for 3 years." His face turned pale. I could almost hear the wheels spinning in his mind as he tried to come up with some excuse, some bullshit story to cover it up, but he was too late. The truth had already been spoken. "I don't know what you're talking about, Dad," he said, his voice shaky now. "Don't lie to me," I said, a sharp edge to my tone. "I've got the paperwork right here. I know everything, Adam. Every little detail." For a moment there was silence. Then he let out a deep breath and leaned forward, looking me straight in the eye. "Look, Dad," he said, his voice a little steadier now. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just trying to help. I thought it would be easier for you, that you wouldn't notice." "Oh, I noticed," I said, a smile tugging at my lips. "I just didn't want to admit it, not until now." He swallowed, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for a way out. But there was no escape. The walls were closing in. He had nowhere to go. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said quietly. "I'll make it right." "No," I said, my voice cold now. "You're not going to make anything right. You've taken too much, and I'm going to make sure you pay for it." And that, my dear son, was when the real fun began. It's strange how time works, isn't it? One moment, everything feels like it's moving in slow motion. The next, it's like a whirlwind, everything spinning out of control. But I had a plan, a slow, methodical plan. I let Adam stew in his guilt for a while, letting him think he could still fix things. I didn't confront him directly, not yet. No, I needed him to make the next move. He had to believe that he was in control, just for a little longer. It was important. And when the time was right, when he least expected it, I would strike. A few days after our little confrontation, he called. His voice was full of apologies, just like I expected. He sounded desperate, weak, like the man I'd known him to be. All along, he promised to pay back every cent. He swore he would fix everything, but there was something in his tone that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't genuine. It was a rehearsed act, a poor attempt at sounding remorseful. And that, my friends, is how you know someone is lying. When they try too hard to convince you of something you already know is false. I let him talk, let him pour out his hollow promises, but inside, I was already planning the next step. I needed leverage, real leverage, something that would make him think twice before crossing me again. So I did what any old man with too much time on his hands would do. I started digging. I didn't just want him to pay me back. I wanted him to feel the weight of his betrayal, the gravity of what he'd done to me. It wasn't enough to take back what he'd stolen. I wanted him to know that there would be consequences. For the next few weeks, I kept my distance. I didn't pick up his calls immediately. I let him sweat. It was a small pleasure, a moment of control that I hadn't felt in a long time. But I wasn't done. No, I had something much bigger planned. I called a lawyer. The lawyer didn't ask too many questions when I told him what I wanted. He was a smooth talker, the kind who could probably talk a judge into giving him a speeding ticket instead of a fine. He didn't need to know all the details. He didn't care about my family. Drama. He just cared about how much I was willing to pay. And when I handed over the retainer fee, I could see the gleam in his eyes. He knew what kind of game we were about to play. What I had planned was simple, really. I wasn't going to drag Adam through court. That would be too easy. Instead, I was going to use the law to my advantage. I had the papers from the loan. I had the evidence that he had been making payments from my account without my knowledge. And I had a lawyer who was more than willing to make sure Adam understood the consequences of his actions. I told the lawyer to send a letter, a formal one that would make Adam realize how serious I was. The letter would detail the loan, the money he'd taken, and the fact that I intended to pursue legal action if he didn't pay back the full amount within 30 days. But the kicker, the part that would really get under his skin, I had the lawyer include the fact that I would be reporting him to the IRS for possible fraud and tax evasion. I knew it would scare him. The IRS. There's nothing more terrifying to a man like Adam than the thought of federal authorities sniffing around his life. I watched, waited. A week went by, and then the phone rang again. "Dad," Adam said, his voice shaking, "I got the letter." "What the hell is this? You're threatening me with the IRS? You can't do this. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." "Well," I said, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice, "you took money that wasn't yours. You used my name to take out a loan without my permission. I understand exactly what you did. The question is, do you understand what happens next?" He was silent for a moment, probably scrambling to figure out what kind of play he could make. "I'll pay you back," he said finally. "I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't involve the IRS. Please, I'll get you the money." I didn't even respond at first. I let the silence hang there. Let him feel the weight of what he'd just said. He thought he could buy his way out. He thought money was all it took to fix everything. But he was wrong. He had no idea who he was dealing with. "I'll tell you what, Adam," I said, my voice calm, almost pleasant. "You can pay me back, but there's a price for what you've done. You've betrayed me, you've stolen from me, and I'm not going to forget that. No, you're going to pay a different kind of price for what you've done." "Dad, please," he started to say, but I cut him off. "No, listen to me," I said, my tone hardening. "I'm not interested in your excuses. You're not going to get away with this. You've already taken enough from me." And then I hung up. For the next few days, I kept the pressure on. I didn't let up. I let him sweat. I didn't respond to his calls immediately. I didn't answer his texts. I wanted him to feel the heat, to realize that there were no easy outs. He thought money would solve this. He thought he could pay me off, smooth things over, and go back to living his life. But no, it wasn't going to be that easy. The next time he called, he sounded defeated. His voice was flat, no emotion, just a hollow shell of the man who had once been my son. "Dad," he said, "I'll do whatever you want. Just don't destroy me over this. I'll pay back every penny. I'll give you the money, all of it. Just don't send that letter to the IRS, please." "You're missing the point, Adam," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "You've taken something from me that you can't repay with money. It's not about the loan. It's about what you've done to me, what you've done to us. You're not just paying back money, you're going to pay for what you've done." He was quiet for a long time. "You're not going to get out of this," I said coldly. "Not this time. I want you to understand something, Adam. I don't care if you pay me back. I don't care if you give me every cent you have. What matters is that you've learned that there are consequences for your actions. What matters is that you remember what happens when you betray the people who love you." And just like that, the game was over. I never saw Adam again after that. He paid back the money, every penny, and though I knew he was ashamed, I never got an apology. Maybe I didn't need one. Maybe deep down I didn't care, because I knew that no matter what, I'd made him feel the sting of his own betrayal. And For once, I felt in control. I'd taken back what was mine, and more than that, I had made him face the consequences of his actions. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about showing him that no matter how old I got, I wasn't going to let anyone walk all over me, not even my own son. Some people might say I went too far, that I should have forgiven him, that I should have let it go. But those people don't know what it's like to have your trust shattered by someone you love. They don't know what it's like to spend years building a relationship only to watch it crumble under the weight of betrayal. So no, I didn't go too far. I did what I had to do, and for the first time in a long while, I could finally sleep at night.